We've now learned how to utilize the factored and vertex forms to solve quadratic equations, along with the advantages and disadvantages of each process. However, the standard form is arguably the most common way to represent a quadratic, so it would be nice if we had a way to solve quadratic equations that contain the standard form without having to always convert to a different form. Unfortunately, the presence of the linear term in most standard quadratic expressions makes this essentially impossible. It turns out that converting to the factored or vertex form is the only way to get most quadratic equations into a solvable state. In fact, this is why we've spent so much time learning about the factored and vertex forms, because they're so useful when solving equations. Still, it would be nice if we had a faster way to go through the solution process, a sort of formula for solving quadratic equations. This video will explore that possibility as we attempt to solve quadratic equations that contain the standard form. When we introduced the standard form, we wrote the generalized standard form like this, where a is the quadratic coefficient, b is the linear coefficient, and c is the constant. If we want to explore quadratic equations involving the standard form, we can just set this expression equal to 0. Even if the initial equation isn't actually equal to 0, we can make one side equal to 0 by moving all the terms to the other side. This means that if we want to have a formula or process for solving any quadratic equation, we should be able to see the details of that process by solving this general equation. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the only way to get this equation into a solvable state is to convert the quadratic expression on the left side into either the factored or vertex form. But recall that most quadratic expressions won't actually be nicely factorable. Because of this, our only remaining option is to convert this general quadratic expression into the vertex form and solve from there. However, when we solved equations using the vertex form, we were able to use a few tricks to avoid the hardest parts of converting into the vertex form. For example, we can start by subtracting c from both sides, which already makes the left side of the equation look a bit easier to handle. Another aspect of this equation that could be difficult to handle is the leading coefficient of a. For that, recall that we can divide both sides of the equation by a, so that we no longer have a leading coefficient. Sure, this means that we now have fractions in our equation, but those are probably easier to work with than the leading coefficient would have been. Also, note that we aren't allowed to divide by 0, so this step only works if a is not 0. However, if a was equal to 0, then we wouldn't have a quadratic equation anyways, so this distinction ends up being irrelevant. From here though, we do have to start putting in some more meaningful work. We can think of the left side of our equation as an almost perfect square, but we do need the correct constant that fits with the other terms here. In order to figure out that constant, let's make a guess at what our perfect square will be. That guess will definitely start with an x, and then we'll add something involving b and a before squaring. But what specifically should we add here? Well, while we might not have done this process with variables before, we have done it several times with numbers. And in those cases, we just divided the linear coefficient by 2, or multiplied it by 1/2 if that was more convenient. In this case, since b over a is already a fraction, it'll be easier to multiply it by 1/2, and that process gives us this constant. Then, we'll expand the perfect square to see what the constant will be in the expanded form, and that turns out to be b squared over 4a squared. This allows us to go back to this step in the main process, where we can now add b squared over 4a squared to both sides. Once we do that, the left side will simplify to the perfect square that we've already constructed, On the right side of the equation, however, we'll need to do a bit of fraction manipulation to get things into a more simplified state. To start things off, we'll switch the order of the two fractions, since subtraction looks nicer than starting with a negative fraction. Then, we need to find a common denominator for both fractions, which ends up being 4a squared. This means that we can multiply c over a by 4a over 4a, which gets us 4ac over 4a squared. Then, we can combine our fractions into this expression. At this point, we're ready for a key step in solving quadratic equations: taking the square root. On the left side, this simply eliminates the exponent from our perfect square. But on the right side, the simplification is a bit more involved. We'll need to think back to this property of square roots to see that we can take the square root of the numerator and denominator separately. Technically, this should not be allowed when the numerator inside the square root is negative. But with our newfound knowledge of the imaginary unit, just know that we would be able to manipulate things if necessary so that this new expression holds true. Also note that we moved the plus or minus sign to the numerator. We could have put this sign in the denominator or kept it in front of the entire fraction, but these are all equivalent to each other, so we'll stick with this arrangement. From there isn't a good way to simplify the numerator any further, but the denominator can be simplified. Since 4a squared is just 2a times 2a, we can write the square root of this expression as 2a. Here, we should note that the square root of a squared is technically the absolute value of a, so there are some additional intricacies of this situation that we could discuss. But for now, just know that these intricacies are rendered irrelevant by the plus or minus sign in the numerator. With that, we've dealt with the step of taking the square root, and now the only remaining step is to eliminate the constant from the left side of the equation to get x on its own. We can achieve this by subtracting b over 2a from both sides of the equation. This leaves us with x isolated on the left side, and on the right side, we have two fractions that already share a common denominator. We will switch the order of these fractions so that the one with the square root comes second. But once we do that and combine our fractions, we can place this simplified expression in the main process. We then get this equation, which tells us that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This equation, as you may already know, is called the quadratic formula. It's a succinct and convenient way to find solutions to a quadratic equation. And now that we've gone through the work of deriving this formula, we can use it with a level of confidence that comes from knowing exactly how we got this formula. One big factor to note, though, is that this is not a standalone formula. Remember that we started this whole process by saying that ax squared plus bx plus c was equal to 0. So this formula is really more of a conditional statement. If ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, then x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This distinction can help us remember the exact conditions under which we're allowed to use the quadratic formula. Now that we have a formula for solving quadratic equations when they're in the standard form, let's practice using that formula a few times. The first thing to check before using the quadratic formula is that we have a quadratic expression in the standard form that's equal to 0. Since this problem is already set up that way, we can basically jump straight into using the formula. First, though, let's explicitly establish the values of a, b, and c. A is the quadratic coefficient, which is 2 in this case. B is the linear coefficient, which is 1, even though it isn't explicitly written. Then, C is the constant, which you might think is 21. However, recall that the general standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. Since we're subtracting 21 here, that's the same as adding negative 21. Thus, c is negative 21. From there, we're ready to use the quadratic formula. The formula starts with negative b, which is negative 1 in our case. Then, we write the plus or minus symbol and take the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 21. Notice here how we put the values of a and c in parentheses. This is a common practice since it makes things much more clear when either a or c is negative. Finally, we need to divide our expression so far by 2a, which is 2 times 2. Now, we just need to do some calculations. Inside the square root, the product of 4 and a and c is going to be negative 168. But since we're subtracting that value from 1, we end up doing 1 plus 168, which gives us 169. This is a square number, so our square root evaluates to an integer, which happens to be 13. Now, since the square root worked out nicely here, we're going to split our answer into 2 separate equations. This gives us x equals negative 1 plus 13 divided by 4, or x equals negative 1 minus 13 divided by 4. The first answer simplifies to 12 over 4, which is 3. And the second answer simplifies to negative 14 over 4, which reduces to negative 7 over 2. Since this was our first application of the quadratic formula, let's check our answers to make sure they both work. We'll eventually see that they do indeed satisfy the equation we started with, and so we successfully applied the quadratic formula. With that, let's check out our next problem. There are 2 key differences with this problem that we should pay attention to. First, notice that this problem has a different variable. We're using n instead of the x that's in our conditional statement up top. This won't be a big deal at all, however, since the quadratic formula can easily be rewritten for other variables like this. Second, and more importantly, the quadratic expression is not equal to 0, so we need to start by subtracting 8 from both sides so that it is equal to 0. Once we do that, though, we're ready to identify our parameters of a, b, and c and apply the quadratic formula. As we do that, we'll note a couple other differences in our application. Since b is negative in this case, negative b ends up being positive. It might be tempting to start the formula with a negative 7, but we should actually start with 7 since the negation of negative 7 is 7. Additionally, notice that our square root does not work out nicely this time. And because of this, it's probably easier to leave our solutions in this compact form, rather than splitting things into 2 equations and writing them separately. In our next 2 examples, notice that we have more major rearrangements to do before we're ready to apply the quadratic formula. Once we make those changes, though, we can identify our parameters and apply the formula. As we go through that process, however, we encounter some new situations. In the case of v, we end up getting the square root of 0, which means that we get the same answer whether we add 0 or subtract 0. Thus, there's only one solution for v. In the case of u, we end up getting the square root of a negative number, so we need to introduce the imaginary unit to continue simplifying. Eventually, we get to this equation, which represents our two complex solutions. You may have noticed by this point that the expression under the square root in the quadratic formula plays an important role in what our solutions end up looking like. If this expression ends up being a square number, we'll typically end up with nice-looking solutions. If this expression is negative, then we'll end up with imaginary numbers in our solutions. We call this expression the discriminant, and this discriminant helps us break our solution process into some nice cases. Assuming that we're working with a quadratic with real coefficients, then there are three main cases we care about. If the discriminant is positive, then we'll get two real solutions to our equation. If the discriminant is 0, then we'll just have one real solution to our equation. And finally, if the discriminant is negative, then we won't have any real solutions to our equation, although we will still have two complex solutions. To relate these statements to the problems on this screen, the discriminant when finding u was negative, and so we had two complex but non-real solutions. But when finding v, the discriminant was 0, and so we had a single real solution. We'll use this information on our last screen to make some predictions about our solutions before we actually find the solutions. In our first problem, we don't need to do any rearranging, so we can go ahead and identify our parameters straight away. Then, we'll calculate the discriminant, which ends up being 117. Since this is greater than 0, we know that we'll have two real solutions. From there, we'll go through the actual solution process, but note that we wrote our application of the quadratic formula a bit differently since we already knew the quantity that goes under the square root. Then, we end up with these solutions and can see that they are both indeed real numbers. For our final problem, the trickiest part is probably that the variable in the equation is the same variable that we typically use as one of our parameters. In this case, we could simply change the variable in the equation temporarily to avoid confusion, but we'll just move forward with the knowledge that we'll need to be careful about which a we're referring to. Thankfully, this shouldn't be too challenging since the parameter a only shows up in conjunction with b and c. Then, let's calculate the discriminant, which we'll eventually see is negative. This means that we'll have no real solutions to our equation, but we'll instead have two complex and non-real solutions. Now, we're ready to actually calculate those solutions, and they end up being these numbers, which we can simplify this way. As you can see, the quadratic formula is indeed a convenient way to generate solutions to quadratic equations that involve the standard form. We know from the derivation process that this formula is built upon a more complex solution process involving the vertex form. Nevertheless, the quadratic formula is a great tool to have in our repertoire when working with quadratic equations. That concludes this video on solving quadratic equations using the standard form. Hope you learned something new, and thanks for watching.